But the example of our precious Jesus is redemption. And the number one place that that has to be practiced is in marriage every single day, because we're imperfect people. We hurt each other even when we don't mean to, and there's an evil devil that wants to split us up. This girl came in to see me, the woman came in to see me, and she said, Pastor Jimmy, my husband has a girlfriend, and he comes home and changes his clothes every night, eats, and goes spends the night with his girlfriend. In the morning, he comes back and eats and changes his clothes and goes to work. That happens every day. And I said, well, I think you ought to divorce the jerk, as far as I'm concerned. She said, I love him. I want to fight for my marriage. I said, okay, well, if you want to fight for your marriage, I'll help you. I said, but don't hear me saying you need to stay in that relationship. And she said, I know. She said, but I love him and I want to work on my marriage. I said, so, okay, well, I'll give you some advice. But you don't have to take it if you don't want to. And she said, what? And I said, well, I want you to go home tonight and I want you to fix up. And I want you to fix a very, very nice meal for him. And when he comes home tonight, before he goes over to his girlfriend, I want you to treat him like you would Jesus Christ. I want you to honor him. I want you to treat him very, very well. Meet all of his needs. I said I wouldn't meet his sexual needs while he has a girlfriend, just, out of, care for yourself. And I said, but I would treat him like with Jesus. And when I said it, she kind of looked at me like I was weird. She said, did you hear what I said about him? And I said, as far as I'm concerned, you can divorce the guy. I don't care. I said, but you said you wanted to fight for your marriage. I'm just telling you, if you want to fight for your marriage, this is how you fight for your marriage. So she left my office and said, okay. So she comes back in a week, and I said, well, how are things going? And she said, well, I promise you I have his attention. And she said, I went home, I did everything that you said, and on about the third, she said, I fixed myself up. Every time he came in the house, morning or evening, I treated him, like he was the greatest guy on earth. I cooked him the best meals. I took care of him. And on about the third or fourth day, he was reading the paper in the living room, and she said he dropped the paper and said, what are you doing? And she said, what do I say to him? And I said, you tell him that the preacher at church told you that you weren't treating him right. And now I want to talk to him. And she said, really? So she goes home, and a few days later, she shows up with him. And he's got a girlfriend. He's a terrible guy. So she comes in the office, and he comes in behind her and sits down in the chair, and he's real down. His head is down, he's down, real dejected look. And I said, hey, how are you? He said, I know you know about me. And I said, I do know about you. He said, I know she's told you I've got the girlfriend and all that kind of stuff. I said, she has told me you have a girlfriend. And he said, well, I don't love her. I said, you don't love your girlfriend? Nah, I don't love her. He said, I just go over there. He said, and now she's treating me good, and that makes me feel bad. And I was thinking, well, poor you. And I said, well, you want to change things? And let me just give you the short version of this. He got gloriously saved in my office that day. He was the best husband and father I've ever seen in my entire life. And they were in our church for several years before they moved away. I love that man. His wife redeemed him to Jesus. Think about that. And I tell you, on a scale from 1 to 10, that's a 10. That old boy's a 10. And it doesn't always work that way. I mean, it's not guaranteed that because she did the right thing that he has to respond that way. But even if you don't have the response you want, it keeps you from being damaged. And you did the right thing, and God's going to honor it. And so it creates, and let me say this. When a person has been redeemed back, no one loves like they love. He adored her. This woman that he was just having this flagrant affair right in front of her face, once she redeemed him back, he adored her. Once you have been redeemed by a person, there's no greater bond, there's no greater intimacy. The devil could never talk me away from Jesus because the devil's never done anything for me. Jesus did everything for me. I love him because of the price that he paid for me when I was in my sins. And that's why I love Karen Evans. Karen Evans treated me better than I deserved, and she's redeemed me 1,000 times in our marriage. She's come after me. She's done the right thing when I was doing the wrong thing many times. And I've redeemed her too. When she's done things, to me that I didn't like or hurt me or whatever. I've had to make the decision. I'm not going to reject her. I'm not going to respond in kind. I'm not going to turn my heart away. I'm going to do the right thing for her until she comes back around. And it works. And it's the only thing that works. The other reason that we do this is because it's what Jesus would do. If we're disciples of Jesus trying to be Christ-like, let me say one other thing. It's the right example to your kids. You don't want your kids living in a home where there's conflict and fighting and bad words and all of those kinds of things. And again, I'm not talking about enabling abusive behavior. I'm talking about being Christ-like in the face of suffering, because we're all going to suffer. So let me give you the rules of redemptive love. Number one, you can't sin even if you've been sinned against. If you sin, it's not redemptive. Jesus died for us while we were in our sins. He didn't sin. He committed no sin. That's what 1 Peter 2 says. We can't sin. 99% of marriage counseling is me listening to a person who did the wrong thing, justifying it because of what their spouse did. I know I said that to her, but let me tell you what she said. I knew I threw the remote at him, but let me tell you what he did. And this is what you're hearing in marriage counseling. You can't justify this. You're just building a bigger fire. You're fighting fire with fire. You're not going to put it out until someone does the right thing. And I love this saying, the best person does the right thing first. If you're the better spouse, you'll do the right thing first and you won't justify sin. Number two, you can't use your mouth to seek revenge or to try to produce results on your own except for righteous and loving speech. It says when he was being reviled, he didn't revile in return. When Jesus was on the cross, they were just lambasting him with all kinds of insults and mocking him and all that. Jesus could have opened his mouth and destroyed all of them. But he didn't respond in kind. And the Proverbs 18 says that the power of this, Proverbs 18:21, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. And let me say, we live in a vulgar, smart alecky society, don't we? And you watch movies and TV, and you just see our society. People are using their mouths to destroy people, literally to destroy people. And if we're going to be redeemers, it means this thing right here has got to change. And we cannot use this to hurt. We cannot use this to seek revenge or put another person down. In fact, when you're redeeming, you're speaking destiny into a person who's not acting like it right now. Literally, you're calling into existence that which is not as though it were. And that's what faith does, and that's what redemptive love does. Number three, you have to trust God for the results as you put your faith in Him. See, marriage problems test your faith in God. They really do. 1 Peter chapter 2, or 1 Peter 3, it says, in the same way, you wives, be submissive to your own husbands. Men and women are equals. It's talking about an attitude. Be submissive to your own husbands, so that even if any of them are disobedient to the word, they may be won as they observe without a word, as they observe your chaste and respectful behavior. And then it talks about a gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in the sight of God. The promise in 1 Peter 3 is a woman can win her husband without a word as he observes your respectful behavior. And then it says a gentle and quiet spirit is precious in the sight of God. A gentle and quiet spirit is the spirit of a woman who has faith that God is powerful enough to change her husband. See, when I'm using redemptive behavior on Karen, the focus isn't Karen, the focus is God. I'm God's partner. And Karen's struggling, or Karen's going through something, or she did something I didn't like, or she said something I didn't like, and my tendency, and maybe I said something to her and she didn't respond the way I wanted her to respond, and my tendency then is to get angry and to go underground or to reject her or turn my heart away and put on my green zip-up jumpsuit or something like that. What redemptive love says is, no, I'm going to fight for her. I'm not turning my heart away. And I'm going to love her the way Jesus loved me when I was in my sins. And what I'm believing is as I do that, she's going to come back around. It works every single time. Not maybe in 2 hours, but it'll work. And what happens is the relationship gets stronger and stronger. It just becomes a natural instinct that when something bad happens, you don't do the wrong thing, you do the right thing. And God honors that. You fall more in love than you've ever before, just simply because it works. And here's rule number 4. You have to be willing to do the right thing for someone who's doing you wrong. You have to meet their needs when they're not meeting yours. And that's real hard for some people. You have to be willing to bless them while they're cursing you and pursue them while they're ignoring you. It's kind of quiet in here right now. And that's what redemptive love does. You're not meeting my needs. What am I going to do? I'm going to meet your needs. You're being sarcastic, whatever. What am I going to do? I'm going to bless you. You're distracted. You're ignoring me. I'm going to pursue you. But the focus isn't you. The focus is my great God and how big He is to change your heart. And when He's changing your heart, you have somebody to come back to. I'm not angry. I'm not your enemy. I'm not bitter. I'm not going to talk down to you. I love you. See, the good thing about Jesus is He saved us from our sins. And when we come to, we have someone to go to. He's not angry. There's not some angry God in heaven with a baseball bat that I have to fear. There's a loving, gracious God who wants me to come home. And redemptive love creates a place to come back to. It creates a relationship that is instantly healed when that person turns around. So it could be that, you're dealing with a 10. Someone watching at home, it might be that you're dealing with a 10. And you have a devastated situation in your marriage. And I want this message to be an encouragement to you. And I want you to consider the example of Jesus in reaching out to your spouse, your husband, or your wife. But it could be that it's not a 10, but it's just a series of 2s and 3s and 4s of hurt, of words spoken or not spoken, of unmet needs or whatever, and your reaction to that has compounded the problem. And I've been there, done that, so I'm not talking down to anybody. But the example of our precious Jesus is redemption. And the number one place that has to be practiced is in marriage every single day, because we're imperfect people. We hurt each other even when we don't mean to, and there's an evil devil that wants to split us up.